We really are, and I know I keep saying this, in scary times. And as we continue to interface with that fact, we can't become numb to it. Let me play this clip for you from Trump's press conference and then get into what is a big story a bunch of people talking about. But I think it needs important context, which is this clip. We've talked about this press conference already, but this is a particularly chilling and tragic clip where Trump is asked, do you think Zuckerberg's recent shift in your direction, donating to your inauguration fund $1 million Meta did, and changing the fact-checking rules for Facebook in ways that MAGA is going to be happy with, hiring your bestie Dana White to the board, and traveling down to Mar-a-Lago to kiss your ring, is that because you threatened him with jail time, as we'll review, or something else? And Trump goes, yeah, probably. He's probably responding to my threats. While you watch this, please do click the subscribe button if you appreciate this show. So watch this clip, and then we'll talk about why it's so important in this upcoming story.
I think they've come a long way. Meta, Facebook. I think they've come a long way. I watched it. The man was very impressive. I watched it. Actually, I watched it on Fox. I'm not allowed to say that. Say it?
Do you think he's directly responding to the threats that you have made to him in the past? With
Probably. Yeah, probably.
The last time you were here, you were asked a question.
Guys, I know at least one MAGA person out there sheds a tear every time somebody says this. And I don't mean to cause any undue burden in the lives of people emotionally, but that's authoritarianism. It is. I'm sorry. I'm not calling him the H name, as y'all hate. I'm just saying, when you threaten, you could throw this headline up, Jaden, somebody with life in prison, as Trump did, we'll talk more about that later, and then they start, after you win an election, going, I love you, and giving you money and changing their platform rules to benefit you, and hiring your best friend and traveling down to your home to say that you're so amazing. And then you get asked, and instead of going, no, I think he's having a genuine change of heart, you go, yeah, he's responding to my threats. He's scared, baby. He's scared. That's how authoritarians operate. If you have an issue with me saying that, take it up with Trump, because he's the one giving us the evidence to come to such a conclusion. And then Mediaite had a really interesting piece, an op-ed from Eric Bolling titled "The World is on Bended Knee to Trump." And it talks about all these different folks who are just 180ing, if that's a word, to support Trump because of, honestly, fear. Jeff Bezos, the owner of the left-leaning Washington Post, showed up with his girlfriend, Laura Sanchez, to kiss the Trump ring. The Post has never endorsed Trump, and like the New York Times has been brutal in its coverage of Trump, the man, and Trump, the candidate. Bezos didn't hide his intentions. He offered millions to the Trump inauguration fund and then took things a giant leap forward by offering future and former First Lady Melania Trump a $40 million deal to produce a documentary on her life for his Prime Video network. I know that's about Bezos, but I just think it's another crazy example. Hey, don't be mad at me for the Post. We're going to go ahead and give your wife $40 million. And this week, Meta founder and chairman Mark Zuckerberg shocked the world when he announced his company, which owns Facebook and Instagram, was moving away from their fact-checking policy to a Muskian community note system. And here's the kicker. Meta announced this new major shift in direction in an interview on Fox News. Zuckerberg appeared on Joe Rogan's podcast on Friday to explain himself further. So you cannot deny, and this is a huge story, that after Trump, when we ask, why was Trump running on this platform of retribution? Why was he talking about, didn't that hurt him? Wouldn't it be better for him to act like he's not going to do it and then do it? Why would he promise and rile up a base saying, I'm going to go after our enemies, and if you don't kiss me wherever I want, then you are going to be hurt because of it? Why would he give all of that away? This is why. Because when you cultivate a culture that convinces even the most powerful people in the world that the only way they're going to get ahead or be okay in your America is to grovel to you, is to, regardless of where they were before, pretend like they now support you or do things that advantage you. That's how you get them to do it. That's how you get people to bend the knee to you, as this op-ed correctly pointed out. And it's not just Zuckerberg, it's one person after another, even media figures, in a pretty tragic way. Okay, so I lay that out because I do think it's important context for a big story that is getting a lot of attention, which is Zuckerberg on Joe Rogan's podcast. I am not attempting to poison the well because I do want to analyze what he says with an open mind. I just think I wouldn't be breaking the story down correctly if I didn't give you the full update on what Zuckerberg's been doing other than making the allegation you're going to hear. And I will bring in Josiah from Pondering Politics to break this down further after watching. But here's him making a pretty major allegation against the Biden administration, and then we'll get into it.
It's all in the public domain. I mean, basically, these people from the Biden administration would call up our team and like scream at them and curse, and it's like these documents it's all kind of out there.
Did you record any of those phone calls?
I don't think we but I think
I want to listen.
I mean, there are emails. the emails are published. It's all kind of out there, and they're like, and basically it just got to this point where we were like, no, we're not gonna take down things that are true. That's ridiculous. They wanted us to take down this meme of Leonardo DiCaprio looking at a TV talking about how 10 years from now or something, you're going to see an ad that says, okay, if you took a COVID vaccine, you're eligible for, for this kind of payment, like this sort of like class action lawsuit type meme. And they're like, no, you have to take that down. And we just said, no, we're not going to take down humor and satire. We're not going to take down things that are true. And then at some point, I guess, I don't know, it flipped a bit. I mean, Biden, when he gave some statement at some point, I don't know if it was a press conference or to some journalists, where he basically was like, these guys are killing people. And I don't know, then like all these different agencies and branches of government basically just like started investigating and coming after our company. It was brutal. It was brutal.
Wow.
And I want to bring in now Josiah from Pondering Politics to break this down. Josiah, this clip is causing quite the stir, especially among the MAGA media folks. And to start with, it's important, we always want to be principled above all else and not allow partisanship to be blinding. And so I'm perfectly willing, with an open mind, to engage with what could potentially set up a very worthy criticism of the Biden administration. What I mean is, if you could demonstrate evidentially that the Biden administration leveraged governmental power to try to force Facebook to do something as it pertains to their platform, and they targeted them, as it seems Zuckerberg was trying to connect the dots there, because they didn't abide by the requests, well, then you really would have a problem worthy of criticism. But as you and I were talking offline, I think there's a lot of, and we'll address that. We'll give, I think, in a little bit our take if we believed Zuckerberg. But there's a little bit of details that you can't ignore that muddy the waters as to why he's saying this. I set up some of that before bringing you in. Give me your take on this and kind of some of what causes it not to pass the sniff test.
Yeah, so again, to echo this, I'm perfectly willing to accept that the possibility of inappropriate contact between the federal government and social media agencies, because the federal government and social media agencies have been in contact since the genesis of social media companies. It's wholly appropriate for the federal government with respect to national security, for example, to be in touch with social media companies and, have a two-way mode of communication. Social media companies reaching out to the government saying, hey, this might be an act of suspected terrorism or vice versa. And given that the lines aren't perfectly delineated, right, I am totally open to the possibility that the federal government put too much pressure on Facebook or Twitter at certain instances, but you need to prove that, right? So number one, okay, just totally open to that. But number two, when I hear Zuckerberg say these things, I have to think, okay, let's think about the context here. So number one, Donald Trump has repeatedly threatened to prosecute and jail Mark Zuckerberg. As a matter of fact, Trump wrote a book in which he threatened to jail Zuckerberg for life. That wasn't the goal of the book, that wasn't the purpose of the book, but it was in the book. President Biden has never threatened to do that. The Biden administration has never threatened to do that. The Biden administration is on its way out. Trump is on his way in. So I think to myself, okay, Zuckerberg, at least on paper, has an interest in getting on Trump's good side. And one of the best ways to do that is talk about how awful the Democrats are, number one. Number two, under the Biden administration, particularly the FTC as led by Lena Khan, a Biden appointee, Facebook has been the subject of litigation and targeted by the FTC, appropriately so, as potentially engaging in monopoly and unethical business practices. So there are pending cases between Meta and the FTC under the Biden administration, which may or may not go away once Trump takes power. So again, Zuckerberg has another vested interest in sucking up to Trump. I'll also note that Zuckerberg donated $1 million. Or Meta did, under Zuckerberg, $1 million to Trump's inaugural fund, which again is extraordinary. So you take all these things, and I'm thinking to myself, it seems awfully convenient. And then for him to say, actually, no, we didn't record these phone calls. We don't really have evidence of it, but we do have their emails published. Well, I would imagine if there were emails published of the Biden administration cursing at Meta employees, and maybe I've missed it. It's entirely possible given the full scope of politics that you and I have missed those particular emails. But I imagine they would be like narrated by James Earl Jones on Fox News. You know what I'm saying? Like it would be like it would be like a full expose. There would be a made-for-TV movie run by Daily Wire over this. So again, just circling back, I'm totally open to the possibility that there were instances that the Biden administration overstepped in its attempt to crush COVID disinformation and misinformation that they sincerely believed was killing Americans. But I can't help but notice all these other incentives that Zuckerberg has at the moment.
Yeah, and that's important. And that's what really caught my ear whenever he said, well, all of this is publicly available stuff. Because it reminded me of the things that were previously supposed to be the bombshell of censorship and then ended up not being. So the publicly available stuff maybe he's referring to is what we've already done so many stories about, whether it be Twitter file stuff or other stories related to Facebook that did get a lot of traction in right-wing media, and then you review the details of it, and it's not at all the type of action that would justify the word censorship that MAGA portrays it to be. And of course, as we keep emphasizing, a private platform, just like how they have the right to have a terms of service and enforce those rules the way that they choose. Thus, if you get kicked off a platform by the platform, that's not some First Amendment violation because it doesn't have to do with the government. But that also means that the government can't come in and force that platform to kick people off of it. And so before, when we've looked at these examples, it'll be an email of, as any of us could do if we have connections at Facebook or in these platforms, that was from some government official saying, hey, we think this post or that post violates your terms of service. And that I didn't have a problem with because, again, it's a request. If you could demonstrate they were forcing the platforms to do so, or as Zuckerberg is accusing the Biden administration of, very interesting timing on that, that they punished you using their governmental power for not complying with their...
Or threatened to do so, Luke, or even like engage the request with like extreme hostility, dropping F-bombs and curse words or whatever, like putting over pressure. Yeah, that would also be something that I would be frustrated with, that I would also criticize.
Yeah, and because I'm not seeing... I highly doubt that he'd be able to evidentially back up the claim that the FTC stuff or any other legal things that Meta's caught up in was a direct response to the discussions about COVID misinformation. I really do doubt that connection's there, but he's sort of making the connection. Then what we're just talking about is maybe there were phone calls that Josiah and I both would say that's inappropriate. You as a government official shouldn't be being that hostile because of the free speech protections that Meta has. And so that totally willing to accept that could have happened, and I would definitely criticize it. I do want to mention, though, because this has been taken to court, NBC News reports a related case. In that case, plaintiffs, which included Louisiana, Missouri, and several Facebook users who had posts removed or downgraded, sought to bar government officials from communicating with social media companies. The Supreme Court, even our extremely conservative Supreme Court, ultimately threw out the lawsuit in a 6-3 ruling, saying in part that there was plenty of evidence of platforms moderating content without government intervention. Quote, in fact, and this is Justice Amy Coney Barrett saying this, the platforms acting independently had strengthened their pre-existing content moderation policies before the government defendants got involved, and the article goes on. So I think this case, I remember when it was at the Supreme Court, this same argument came up about inappropriate, quote unquote, censorship, as it would be argued by the MAGA folks and by these plaintiffs. But then every time you review the details of the discussions, it's abundantly clear the social media platforms did not feel forced and would not listen to plenty of requests when they were brought.
Yeah, it's also like, while you're talking, I'm also thinking, I think it's also telling, because think of Joe Rogan as the Jamie pulled this up sort of thing. So imagine, again, maybe I've totally missed it, and maybe Joe Rogan wasn't on his A game, but you would think if there was documented evidence of abuse by Biden administration's officials to Meta employees, why wouldn't Joe Rogan, he would have been like, well, Jamie, pull it up. Let's read the emails, because, we've seen that sort of behavior from Rogan before when he thinks he has a gotcha against the Democrats. So again, just my spidey sense is going up. And then the other couple of things I was thinking about was one of the other reasons that I have a degree of skepticism here, or a few reasons. Number one, if this were truly a principled free speech position, why has Zuckerberg been so silent about what we know are, free speech, crossings of the line by Donald Trump and the Trump administration? So again, the public threats, the direct personal public threats that Donald Trump has made against Mark Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg doesn't have any smoke for that. He has nothing to say about that. He's like, what are you guys talking about? I don't know anything about that. Number one. Number two, we know during the investigation by congressional Republicans into the Twitter files, and we're going to use, I'm going to use a direct quote here, but we know from a Twitter employee that when Donald Trump was president, he requested that Twitter take down a tweet by Chrissy Teigen, celebrity, wife of John Legend, insulting Trump, referring to him as an expletive. 3 expletives, as a matter of fact.
I thought you were going to quote it.
I was going to quote it, but I thought about, this isn't my show, it's your show. And yeah. So in the congressional record is the phrase pussy ass bitch, because that is what Chrissy Teigen used to describe Donald Trump when he was president. And the Trump White House reportedly reached out to Twitter to try to get them to take it down. Now, that's the other thing, too. So think about it. When governments reach out to private companies or to corporate interests to say, hey, maybe this violates your terms of service, maybe this is dangerous disinformation, what are they doing it about? So with Biden, it sounds like it's COVID disinformation or potential COVID disinformation. That seems a hell of a lot more noble than trying to pressure social media companies to take down petty insults against the president. Seems to be no documented evidence of President Biden doing that. So again, curious as Zuckerberg has no comment about any of that. And then I guess what it just comes back down to is we're seeing this as part of a broader pattern. It's not just Zuckerberg, right? So we're seeing, overtures from major media figures, be it Jeff Bezos and the Washington Post, Zuckerberg and Meta, obviously Elon Musk and others, the billionaire owner of the LA Times. There seems to be a capitulation to Trump, which can only be contextualized by his repeated threats against what he views as hostile press. So the last thing I'll say, Luke, just to really put the cherry on top of the sundae, is even Tim Pool has publicly said, he said it on Piers Morgan, that he doesn't trust Zuckerberg. He considers Zuckerberg a fair weather friend, and he doesn't know how much, what to believe here. And so to me, it's like, think about it. When you lose Tim Pool, who is inclined to believe damn near anything, salacious about the Democratic Party, when even Tim Pool is like, I don't know about this, Zuck. I don't know if this is a principled opposition that you're taking here. I think we all have reason to be suspicious.
A few points, actually. I think we have a little bit longer to go because there's so much interesting things here. I want to circle back to your point about so many different powerful folks. Trump wins, all of a sudden they 180 and they're super friendly to Trump and donating to him and and all these different things. But to just quickly, I did find very interesting your point about how even if I accepted every single point that Zuckerberg made, there would be then a lot of stuff I'd want to denounce in terms of the activities he's talking about. And it would be an interesting comparison of when the Biden administration crossed lines and why versus when Trump goes, the press are criminals, they should be in jail, all these different threats against people and them need to be punished by him using his governmental power. It's only because they speak bad about him. That's the only reason he'd do it. He'd violate the First Amendment. Even if I believe the MAGA argument about Biden, it would be fear or emotion because of a lot of people dying of COVID, which then, to again, for our MAGA folks out there, summarize our position. If indeed inappropriate actions were taken and Meta employees felt threatened or felt their First Amendment protections about how to run their platform were violated, and you could demonstrate that evidentially, which over and over they failed, but if you could, I'd absolutely denounce that behavior on the part of Biden administration officials because we have a principle and aren't just fighting for a team. But, you know, you mentioned Josiah, and it brought to my mind how many different powerful folks had gone to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring. And it reminded me of this clip.
Jeff Bezos came, Bill Gates came, Mark Zuckerberg came. Many of them came numerous times. The bankers have all come. Everybody's coming. Jeff Bezos came, Bill Gates came, Mark Zuckerberg came. Many of them came numerous times. The bankers have all come. Everybody's coming.
Indeed, huh?
Everybody's coming, Luke. Like in Mar-a-Lago, I think it's worth noting. People came multiple times, and I mean that's really impressive. It truly is how many people are coming and how often they came at Mar-a-Lago.
It is.
Yeah, it's interesting that Trump would like just make a point to talk about that at his press conference. I mean, you know,
it's weird. I don't. It's strange. Josiah, where can people find you?
Well, listen. You can find me at youtube.com/@ponderingpolitics, and I would appreciate a like and subscribe. You can come there once or twice, multiple times, but if you can go to youtube.com/@ponderingpolitics, one word, I would greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.